I regret to say. But thank you for your interest. Charlotte Reed, let's ask your thoughts here about pets as they are impacted and pet owners by the coronavirus outbreak.
Yeah, well, Jim, thank you so much for having me on, and I'm
Sure.
glad to be here. You know, the last man who was with you a few seconds ago mentioned that he was a senior and he had pets and he was, reluctant to walk his pets. I mean, I think that's actually a good comment he made. I mean, depending on where we live, whether we live in an urban or suburban or more of a country environment, we just have to be wary of what we're doing. So I think, the big word for the day is or the big phrase for the day is social distancing. So I think if you're living in an urban environment, you have to be careful when you are walking your dog. I think getting out with your dog kind of helps relieve the tension. I mean, if you're home all day watching the news, I'm sure after 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours of the news on all day, it's a great idea if you do have a pet to get out, get some exercise. Studies have shown that spending time with your pet reduces tension and stress and helps, reduce your blood pressure. So it's a great idea to get out. But if you are going to get out, you need to practice your social distancing. Stay 6 feet away from people on the street. I don't have a problem with walking the same route. Just don't stop and talk. And if you do, make sure you're away from people. It's not necessarily a great idea to go to the dog park and congregate for a variety of reasons. I mean, obviously, you might see friends there, but it's not a great place if people are coughing or gathering. I mean, obviously, it might be, depending on where you are, it might be less than a gathering of 10 or even 50 people. You just have to be careful because, like the report just said, if people gather, what if someone has corona and they're coughing and sneezing, and your pets can kind of act like a contamination surface, not necessarily pass the corona COVID-19 virus.
All right. 1-866-50-JIMBO is our number, 1-866-505-4626. To your knowledge, are there any particular pets that special attention should be applied to as regards this virus? You got, of course, your whole variety, cats, dogs, birds, what have you.
Well, really, it started in the end of February. A dog in Hong Kong, from what we understand, a dog in Hong Kong had tested a week positive. This is where this whole thing got started with pets. The owner was about 60 years old, a little over 60. She had come down with corona. When they went to test her pet had shown her dog, it was a 19-year-old Pomeranian, had come up with a week positive. The dog was taken into quarantine by the Hong Kong Agricultural and Fisheries Department. It had been given a few more tests. Eventually, it had tested that it had corona, but the dog never got the virus. 2 days ago, we just heard today that the dog had died about Monday. These are the reports coming out of Hong Kong, but the dog had never shown that it had full-blown COVID-19. And really, the owner is now back at home, and she would not allow for the dog to have an autopsy. So based on that, we don't really know what's happening with that. And also, the World Health Organization is reluctant to say and says there is no body of evidence that you can get or dogs or cats can pass COVID-19 to animals. So right now they're looking at it as a surface contamination. So if you're around your dog or cat and you're coughing, maybe your dog might test positive. But, it's kind of at this point, most veterinarians here are kind of saying there's no research.
All right. Very good.
There's no body.
Yeah. Fair enough. Let's go to Will in Las Vegas. Good evening, Will.
Hey, Jim. Good evening to you, and thank you very much for your show and the ability to have input. I don't want to address the young lady, but I'd like to give you my opinion, if I might.
Whatever. Go ahead.
I think this whole – thank you. I'm very angry, and I won't use any vulgarity, but this is a crock, and it is either an example of our public service failure or it is an example of what we call secret information because everything's become proprietary or executive sessions or not for public disclosure. And, I'm an adult, and I'm sick and tired of these people coming out on stage and pretending to be a professional and exemplary intellectual Mensa member. And, oh, by the way, you don't...
Well, regardless of intellectual Mensa members, I mean, doctors do have a certain level of knowledge that the rest of us don't, Will.
Well, I agree with that, Jim, but I was going to a larger point. The point is that these people gather in a back room and have a discussion, and they come out with a pre-programmed discussion. And you know what that means.
It could mean that they have some information to impart to us. I mean, I don't know that there's some automatic ulterior agenda here. I don't know that. And frankly, neither do you.
Well, no, I agree with everything you just said. I'm headed for a different point here, Jim.
Okay, go ahead.
The point is that when you encounter a problem that is systemic, unprecedented, and unknown, you go open, collective. I'm an older male. I've been many, many places. And when you open up a problem that's unknown to the collective, you get a true engagement. It's just magnificent, like your show tonight. It gives you a wide array of intellect and insight and ideas, and they're not doing that. And, Jim...
Well, now, who's they who are not doing this? I guess I'm not quite sure what you mean. I mean, I think most talk shows that take phone calls are taking a wide variety of input. Are you suggesting, for example, when the president holds a news conference that he should be taking phone calls? I'm not quite sure who they are who's not taking your input.
Well, that's a fair pushback, and I agree. The reason I'm hesitant is usually a talk show doesn't have the time to have some long discussion. But what I'm suggesting to you is that the president should have had live cameras in that back room. We should have been able to see the level of engagement, the level of seriousness of this matter. Instead, they go in the back. We see it across the board in our society. They go into executive session. They end up with these discussions. Then they come out and go, well, you're just stupid because you don't know. Well, the reason we don't know... Well,
no one has ever said the phrase, you're so stupid and you don't know. I mean, let's not get too carried off the deep end here, Will. People get together. They try to get their presentation correct. They come out and they give it. That doesn't mean that they're automatically plotting something nefarious behind the scenes. And I don't know that the presence of cameras would necessarily lend themselves to a frank discussion with the president. I mean, again, I guess I'm looking at something that I don't really see a problem here. I mean, what is it that they're not doing that you think they should be?
Well, I think it's just listening to the news 24/7 is very overwhelming for a lot of people. So I can understand the gentleman's frustration because everyone doesn't know what to do, and every day we discover something else. I mean, who thought people would be running to the store and getting toilet paper? Who would ever think that a lot of our medications and drugs come from China? So every day there's something new and revealed. So, one of the things I think what the president and his task force are trying to do they are trying to limit full-blown fear. So that, I think, can be very frustrating for people to be learning all of these details. And also, we don't want to have our population panicking. We don't want to have people running to the banks and taking all the money, people going to the stores and fighting in the aisles at supermarkets. We don't want to live like that. So, sir, I can totally understand your frustration, but I think at some point, we just have to kind of take care of ourselves. This is not a situation where we can go next door and necessarily take care of our neighbors. So, yes, I do understand your frustration.
I do, too. But again, sometimes situations are inherently frustrating, and I don't know that there's any easy answer to that. We'll take a break. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Her website is thepetbuzz.com, thepetbuzz.com. We're looking at the coronavirus situation as it affects those with pets. Now then, can they get coronaviruses? And then I want to go back to our calls, Charlotte.
Well, there's about 7 different types of coronavirus. This COVID-19, the virus that everyone's up in arms about now, many people are getting sick around the country, around the world, actually. pets cannot pass the coronavirus to us, nor can we pass it to them. There's really, according to the World Health Organization, there is no research to support human-to-animal spread at this time. A lot of what's been going on regarding animals really revolves around a dog in Hong Kong who was 19 years old, who tested weak positive originally, and then after being taken into quarantine by Hong Kong Agricultural and Fisheries Department, they had various tests, body cavity, nasal. It did test positive, but those are reports coming out of Hong Kong. But really, the animal ended up showing no clinical signs of the disease. So that's kind of why it's very difficult to say. This is like a single case that we've heard about. So we just found out the dog had died. But, the dog was 19 years old. But like I said,
it's not clear what the dog died of, I gather.
Exactly. And the owner has refused to have an autopsy done. So, we know at some point, pets can get infected with different diseases and they can become reservoirs at point.
Right.
But we have not, no information regarding this dog having COVID-19 virus.
Fair enough. To Gil, who listens to us online in Manila, the Philippines. Hello, Gil.
Hello, Jim. How fortuitous. We just acquired, just a few days ago, before we were locked down, a 2-month-old puppy, a mix of Shih Tzu and Pomeranian. And he seems to be a very, very happy dog, and my wife has taken quite an interest in him and is now feeding him through a baby bottle. But be that as it may, I told her that it seems to me that she might, at this point, she might love the dog more than she loves me.
Well,
and
I'm sure that's not the case.
That's not true. Well, she replied, that's not true, that I love you both the same. So,
settle for parity, okay.
Okay, but what I wanted to find out is we're going to have to postpone doing the second rabies shot and the deworming of this pet because we're locked down for at least 30 days, and they were scheduled to be done this week. Is that going to make much of a difference?
Well, you have to, first of all, definitely call your veterinarian, talk to him, get his advice. I'm not a veterinarian. I want to say that, first of all. Core vaccines are really important, especially if you do have younger animals and depending on your environment. Try to keep the animal as close to home as possible. Don't be walking it around outside in the neighborhood because it's very young. It has a very delicate immune system. So you definitely want to be careful, but definitely call your veterinarian and talk to him or talk to a representative in his office. Some veterinarians here in the States, what they're doing is they are locking down their offices. They're having people drive up. Somebody's coming out to the car, bringing the animal in, cleaning it up, doing what they have to do. So that's absolutely going on. Here it's happening in Florida and some other states. I'm in Florida. But definitely rely on the advice of your veterinarian.
All right. And another quick call for our guest, Paul in Zanesville, Ohio. Hello, Paul.
Good evening, Jimbo, and your guest. Isn't it the year of the rat over in China?
I'm not sure what.
Actually, the lunar zodiac is, yes, it is the year of the rat. I was born under the year of the snake. We're supposed to be having good luck, but that was in the beginning of February. So is that my name is Charlotte, by the way, Petrendologist Charlotte Reed.
Right.
Is that your question?
Was that your question, Paul? Quickly.
No. My question was, what do you think about mice and rats carrying that over here? Because I have a
All right. Well, let's let our guest respond quickly. We have a little amount of time here before the break. Do they have anything to do with this?
As far as what we know, the coronavirus, COVID-19, has been carried by people. No one has said anything about dogs and rats, and it's really people have been traveling the world, and it's a human.
We have to take a break that doesn't move, and we'll be back with more in just a moment. 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-50-54626. And one more call for our guest, Charlotte Reed, again, pet trend and lifestyle expert, the petbuzz.com, her website, thepetbuzz.com, as we go to Sonia in Fort Worth, Texas. Hi.
Hi, Jim. I want to ask you, guest, I've heard a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, when all this coronavirus started, that they euthanized 10,000 dogs in China. And I'd like to ask your guest if she heard of such
They're doing what with 10,000 dogs in China?
They euthanize them.
Euthanize? Well, I mean, I wouldn't know how many. I mean, China is a nation of well over 1 billion people. I wouldn't know whether they euthanize dogs or not. Of course, in some parts of Asia, they eat them. I don't know what to say to that. Charlotte?
Yes. Hi, ma'am. How are you this evening? You know, it's actually, we've just heard some reports coming out of China recently that there's a lot of misinformation about coronavirus in terms of pets. And a lot of people in Wuhan, where the virus started, it was around when the Wuhan virus came out, it was around the same time or right after Chinese New Year. So a lot of people have smaller pets because they have smaller accommodations. In China, and a lot of people left their pets thinking they were going to be gone for a few days and left their pets behind. So right now what they're finding out is a lot of people have left pets behind. Over about 1,000 pets have been left behind. Some people do not have the exact information. Some people have actually abandoned their dogs, according to various newspapers in China. Just last week I had seen reports that military in China were but this is, like I said, this is just reports that I've seen. I mean, it's been confirmed by some of their local papers that some military have actually have killed dogs or picked up dogs. But there are a lot of organizations. I mean, the Humane Society International actually is working with animal activists in China to try to save as many dogs as possible. Some that have been abandoned, some that have been left behind, and some that people are trying to give away because the government is not giving them as much information as they should. So, but that's the reports that are coming out of China. A lot of that material hasn't been verified. It's coming out of local Asian periodicals. So, but you know, you're right. You have to just keep abreast of the information. So I'm glad that you brought that to the forefront.
Absolutely. Charlotte Reed, thank you so much for illuminating this aspect of the crisis, and we do appreciate it. Sometime in the future, we'll have to just come back and talk about pets without a crisis attached to it.
Thanks so much, Jimbo. It's been great being a guest on your show. Good night, everyone.
Take care. Charlotte Reed, and again, her website, thepetbuzz.com. Let's go to Sharon in Crane, Missouri now on this coronavirus. Good evening, Sharon.